New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is pleased to present The Inclusive Church, Ideas and Resources for Leaders of Multicultural Ministries. The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Tuesdays at 12 noon Mountain Time. Join Tracy and her guests as they go deep and share practical tips and resources you can use in your ministry. And now let's explore the Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown.
Okay, it's your weekly, every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time little mini dance party, right? If you watched before, you know that it's pretty hard for me to not dance a little bit when I hear that music. So I hope you take that 30 seconds or 40 seconds to dance as well. My name is Tracy Brown, and I am so delighted to welcome you to the Inclusive Church Show, where every week we just take a few minutes out of our busy lives to stop and think, oh, what could I be talking about? What projects might I try? What things are other people doing that demonstrate their commitment to be inclusive and inclusive, especially in their spiritual communities? So, two things I always say at the top of the show. One, it is the inclusive church or inclusive churches, but I am redirecting, I am reclaiming the word church to mean the congregation, the people, not a piece of property, not a building that we go to, but it is the people who go to the building or who gather together to study, teach, and practice spiritual principle together, whether it's in a building or out in nature or wherever you may gather, in someone's home, etc. So inclusive church is about a gathering of people in spiritual community. And the second thing I always try to remember to mention is that you will hear me say a lot. This is something leaders in our spiritual communities should be thinking about or could practice. And someone said to me the very first week, well, Tracy, I watched the show, but I'm not sure I should keep watching it because I'm not a minister. So people who know me already know I have a mantra. You do not have to be a minister to have a ministry. But in this case, we're not even talking about having a ministry. We are talking about anyone who is a leader, anyone who leads a team, anyone who donates financially on a regular basis in order to have the message go on, anyone who serves on the board, anyone who actually comes, participates, but in some way shows up to influence the experience that they have and that others around them have. If that applies to you, then you are the leader I am talking to and talking about. This week, I have two amazing guests, and it is impossible for us to contain ourselves. So you're going to get to eavesdrop on an ongoing conversation, a conversation that really has no beginning and has no end. And you're going to get a snapshot of that. And as is typical for me, some of you know this, we don't have a script. And we didn't have a meeting before the meeting to talk about what we were going to talk about at the meeting. We have some ideas to think about, and you are just going to eavesdrop on a natural, organic conversation. So I hope you're up for that. My two guests are Reverend Amani and Reverend David, and I'm going to bring them on, and here we are, the three of us.
Hey, Sam.
Anything could happen.
Things are possible.
Anything is possible.
And I will mention, just because it feels irresponsible for me not to mention it. I am based in Dallas, Texas. We had tornadic force winds this morning, and my internet has been a little unpredictable. And so if something happens, don't be concerned. I'll be back. And we have some people who are with us. We've got Abe Gordon. We've got Teresa Valenzuela. We've got Shay Bird with us. And we actually have a bunch of other people who just haven't put their names in the comments or chat. And so I just want to encourage everyone, if you'd like to do that, like us to acknowledge you, do that. Or as we're talking, if you want to add a comment like Abe did, we are all practitioners. Yes.
Amen, amen.
And we can all be leaders regardless of our title. Okay, so we're already like 7 minutes in. So I'm going to give the briefest of introductions and let people get to know who you are as we talk. Reverend Amani is based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Reverend David is based in Atlanta, Georgia, and they are both amazing. That's all I'm going to say right now.
Oh, why, thank you.
Because your introductions would take another 6 minutes. So I do want you to simply put the connection together for our topic today. So our topic today is inclusive churches. And I invited David and Amani because I knew that they have been doing things to be inclusive in their spiritual communities for years. This is not a new topic for them. Right. But what has recently happened in recent years is that each one of them have partnered with another spiritual community and are sharing space with another spiritual community. And I'm curious about how that has impacted the long-term commitment to inclusion. So Amani and then David, if you would just say a little bit about where you are, who you're sharing space with, and how that's different from what you were doing before.
So I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was giggling. I was thinking David and I probably should swap pulpits. We're like leading the wrong churches. So I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, leading the Albuquerque Center for Spiritual Living, which has been here for many, many, many years. I'm in a city and a state that is 3% Black and is a majority Latino and Native community. So that already gives a context to sharing space with a small Black Muslim community, the Manara Muslim Community Center. And we've been sharing space. They actually moved into our campus about 4 years ago. And then 2.5 years ago, we sold our building, and Manara and the Albuquerque Center moved into the first Unitarian church here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is a very large congregation with a 5-acre campus. And they are a majority white community. And we are also majority white, but less white than the Unitarian community. And, 3 different faith traditions, but 3 communities who all are deeply committed to a world that works for everyone. And so that's one of the foundational pieces that has brought us together on the same campus.
Beautiful. All right. Well, so we are Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta in Atlanta, Georgia. We go back to 1979. It's about our 45th year this year. And we've been in many different places. Much of that history, we were at the Arts Center in Midtown Atlanta at the Woodruff Arts Center. And the church became very big and popular during that time. And in this last year, post-COVID, we needed to move out of the space that we were in and find new place to habitate. And we have always been close to, both in theology and in partnership, in relationship, but also in some really interesting ways. Physically, our church has been nearby neighbors to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta, otherwise known as UUCA, which goes back to the 1950s here. They were one of only 2 white churches that marched with Dr. King here in the city of Atlanta. They have a rich, wonderful history that actually goes back to the 1880s, and then it broke up, and then they reformed in the 1950s. So deep civil rights commitment, and we've, as I said, been proximity partners with each other, or neighbors to each other, for a very long time. And in fact, our 2 executive directors are neighbors and best friends. And so, look at that. Balloons. Yay. I don't know how that happened, but we celebrate that. Absolutely. And so when it came time for us to look for new space, that was a natural place to go, because we had relationship there. And they have moved into a space that they bought pre-COVID, and then took that time, a couple of years, to remodel and renovate inside. And it's absolutely gorgeous. It's state-of-the-art everything, and inclusive, gender-neutral bathrooms, and it's just fantastic, everything about it. And so we meet there in the afternoons. And so this is the first jumping off point of our conversation about the keys to that, and how that all works, is relationship. That's going to be a phrase I'm going to come back to again and again and again and again. Obviously, I'm very lucky that my executive director is both best friends and neighbors with their executive director. But when Tracy first invited me to this conversation, the first thing actually that I thought of was some of the relationship building that I've done, nationally and internationally with larger organizations. I've done a lot of that for many years. And that too is all about relationships. Mm-hmm. You don't come in with, hey, let's go do this thing together. I mean, there might be a interfaith celebration, Dr. King Day or something else, or a climate justice something where there's a march or there's a event and let's have a booth together or something like that. That might be the entry point. But ultimately, long-term interfaith work is based on the fact that you have deep relationship with each other, and that just takes time, and it's more than interfaith services, and it's more than marches and events once a year. It can include those things, but it has, at some point, it has to become deep, real relationships, and so we happen to have that here in Atlanta, and it's a beautiful thing. So I'll stop there. We can't hear you, Tracy.
That actually is one of the things that I think people get confused about. They think, well, if I participate in an interfaith event, I'm being inclusive and I'm teaching people in my community to be inclusive. And it's not that that's completely untrue, depending on what context it is in. But often when we go to an interfaith event, or maybe we exchange pulpits once every 2 years with some leader from a different faith system or belief system, we're teaching respect for difference, but we're not actually teaching collaboration or connection, or, David, to use your word, relationship. So I am curious, and I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure. So are you only sharing space? Like, David, you said, you all meet at 3. So you meet at a different time. You're only sharing the property. Or are there other ways that you are collaborating and actually engaging together?
Bonnie, you want to go take it first?
Sure. Yes, there are. And I just have to say ditto to what David said, right? When it came time for us to move, my first call was to Reverend Angela at Unitarian, because we have a relationship, right? A long-standing relationship. And when I said, hey, can I, bring my folks over to your campus, and can I bring the Black Muslim community and their archery program and their judo program and their food outreach program? Can we just all come hang out? And she was like, come on. It was one phone call, it took 10 minutes, right? Because relationship.
Yeah.
And so we do all of those things now on campus, right? So the judo program is there. The Wednesday night food outreach that we all participate in, along with the Baha'i community, every week is happening. And some of the sweetness that I would say that we're doing together that isn't out-facing, isn't public-facing, which is we pulpit swap, we come to each other's services. I lead a thing, they lead a thing. We do Christmas Eve together now, even with the imam from Manara. We've been doing that for a couple of years. So there's the public-facing things. But the thing that I think has been the sweetest, and maybe the place that I think other faith leaders and communities could take into their practice, is the intentional relationship building among the community members. The lunches that the other clergy and I go to on a regular basis, the prayers that we are holding for each other. We've moved into a covenant relationship. That feels really an important part of this work that is beyond, who's in what room on what day.
Sweet.
Yeah, ditto to all those things. We're going to keep saying that throughout this broadcast, I think. But our relationship's a little bit newer. We've only been in the building just under a year now, and so some of those things are still forming. But we did not have our own Christmas Eve service as SLCA. We joined theirs and invited our folks, and they had me as part of the service, and so on and so forth. And they've got a great climate action group that's very, very active. And so our folks that are interested in that, we pair them with that, and send them to their meeting and have them bring back ideas and things like all of those things. And a few different services throughout the year. We've had some things where we share the fellowship hall at the same time, so that we're eating and communing with each other after the service, and special events and things like that. And it's, for us, the other aspect of this, and you may have a question that's leading to this later on, but I think one of the things you learn in interfaith partnership work, and one of the places where you have to be self-conscious and mindful of is cultural, differences. I don't mean just cultural as in, ethnic background, but the cultural of the community. Unitarians and New Thought folks are very similar from a faith-based perspective, from a principles perspective. Theologies are similar. We share Emerson together and other things, and so we get along really well in prayers and and our justice issues and things like that. There's not a lot of big reaching there. But culturally, the services can feel very different and look very different because they have a way and style of doing things, and we have a way of style of doing things. And so that comes into play when we're co-planning something, but also that culture also extends to how we approach stuff. So the culture of the denomination and the structure of the local community. And so I'll tell on myself in giving this example. I'm a very, we're short-staffed and we're a smaller community. We live very close to the bone in many ways, and also in the calendar. So, we're like 3-6 months out max, and I have a big idea, and it's, we're planning it and we're in the meetings and there we go. And our Unitarian friends, like, they are packaged and tight and neat, like 12 months out, solid, forget about it. So if I go to them and I'm like, hey, the fall is coming, and like right now, right? I would think the fall is coming and maybe we could do a da-da-da and blah, blah, blah. They're going to look at me with blank faces and be like, yeah, no, October, November, like, it's booked. We're locked down. We know exactly what we're doing by the minute, by the day, what the committee's in charge of. And, so get us next year. And I'm like, wait, November next year? Like, I can't even conceive of that, right? Like, it doesn't exist in my consciousness yet. And so those are style differences. And we have to be aware of, how do I need to adjust if it's important to me to engage them, and how might they need to adjust? So it's a both and then also just like structure of the organization itself, right? They are very committee heavy. Some of our CSLs are this way, they've got committees on committees on committees on committees, and the senior minister, like, if I go to the senior minister and say, hey, I have this idea, like, she's going to be like, yeah, gee, that sounds really sweet, but you're going to have to talk to these folks. And then they have to talk to these folks, and then they have to talk to these folks before it ever even gets to me, And so now that's why, like, folks that we have that are interested in climate work and climate justice, we send them to their climate justice meetings. We have a pet ministry and, things like that. So it's congregant to congregant so that it can filter up to the leadership. Whereas somebody's style might be, well, let's just get the leaders together and then the leaders can decide. They're very congregant, spiritual democracy heavy, and committees and all that.
I love that because, I love that for so many different reasons, but a couple of the reasons are, one, the statement you made about culture. And so often when we hear the word culture, people assume you're talking about race and ethnicity. And while race and ethnicity do translate into cultural norms, expectations, needs, and styles, that's just one of the many pieces of the puzzle. So, CSL communities have a culture. Unitarian, Universal Unitarian communities have a culture. Islam communities and mosques have a culture. Jewish synagogues, and that right there's that. And if we are really skilled in our inclusion work and we've built the skills, then we can recognize what's happening as a culture clash where I need more information, or I need different skills, or I need a different approach, versus I don't like these people and I'm just going to go over here and they need to adjust to me.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was going to just say to that, what David started us with is even if you're moving in with another CSL, right? Like even if you're going to share campus with another New Thought community, you are going to have different cultures in your community. And for me, if you start from a place where the relationship is the thing we value the most,
yes,
then whatever the cultural differences are, whatever the policy differences are, whatever those things are, can be managed because we value the relationship.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And then they become places where it's like, well, isn't that, Reverend Tarrant and I, we laugh about it. We're fascinated by it. We're like, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And with some of my other interfaith, friends here in Atlanta, some that are sort of New Thought Pentecostal, you can email me if that term really confuses you. But they exist, they're real. So we laugh with each other about, just how, again, culture, community style, how we approach things. And, it's like, well, kind of like, these are the things we have to deal with based on, our traditions and who we are. And sometimes my friends, they'll be like, oh, you're so lucky. You don't have to deal with that. Like, you don't have to deal with, I'll give an example from my New Thought Pentecostal friends. They'll be like, well, you don't have to deal with somebody coming to you and saying, the Holy Ghost told me that, right? Like, that's not a thing, right? It's not a thing in your community. You don't have to worry about that. I have to, this other minister, is like, I have to filter through and interpret, is this person crazy? Is this person serious? What's going on here? Like, that's a struggle that I have on a daily basis. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have that one. And they're like, but you've got committees and boards and all these things. And my church is run by my family and it has been for generations. And so I don't have to deal with all that. So we get to talk about our different cultures as both blessings and curses and ways to learn from each other. So it's really fun. And it remains fun and never a challenge or a problem because the relationship is the same.
Because the relationship is what is key.
Yeah.
And I would offer that, when we started, we went into covenant. The clergy and I, we went into covenant. We wrote up covenant. We shared it with the larger community so we could all be clear about, like, here's what we value. Here's the agreements we've made from this deeper place than our lease agreement. But what's interesting is, we are just getting ready to sign our 3rd year lease. So we're over 2 years into this with Unitarians, and it's just now getting juicy. Right?
Yeah.
The honeymoon is over. The niceties have ended. We're like, but why did they have parking for that over here? And why didn't so-and-so sweep up after their hospitality hour? Because don't they know we're having a sound bath and we're going to be laying on the floor, right? So that's now we're getting into those real nitty.
Yeah.
Which is really where I believe the work of inclusion happens.
Yeah.
Right? It's when it comes off the page and it's like, oh, y'all need yoga mats? Like, you need a clean floor like that?
Yeah. Again, it just like a real relationship, right? You get to a certain stage where then the stuff begins to bubble up. Yeah, absolutely.
you know, and I've had the chance to have real conversations with community members now about this is it. Now we're doing the work, right? We've been doing the book studies. We've done so many book studies,
Let's do a book study. Oh.
Woo, the book studies. And I'm like,
I can't laugh too much. I got one that I'm promoting right now. So
we're gonna do your book, David. But it's like, okay, now we can take it off the page.
Yeah. Yes.
Now we can take it off the page and let's understand how to live this teaching.
How to live that. And you probably had to go through so that's where you're at 3 years in, and where we're at, it's still the niceties. And, you know, again, it's a deep relationship. I don't, you know, be disparaging about that stage at all. But I think I also noticed in my years of doing different kinds of interfaith work, I've also noticed this very curious thing where I think sometimes it's easier to do interfaith work with groups that are vastly different than you. Right? It's easier to, well, let's get together with the Muslim group, let's get together with the Jewish group or the whatever. Unitarians and New Thought, CSL and Unity, right? Because there's this, I don't know what it is, a fear that pops up that, well, you know, some of your congregants might like you better, or your music, or because they're so close.
Yeah.
That it's easier to do it when it's very different, right? Because it's like, well, that fear isn't there, you know. It's like, you're not going to sleep with them, like,
right? 100% agreement. 100%. It's like, oh, wait a minute, you might be attracted to them.
Right. And so you know, I think Tracy, you didn't think it was going to go there, but communities have to move through that, right? Yeah. They have to, you know, we have to go. I've had congregants who've said, we're going to go check that out, and I'm like, good, go check it out. You know,
and I think you go in intentional about that, which is what we did. Like, we made an agreement in our covenant that when congregants, you know, go to Rev Angela because they're mad at me, that she's going to send them back, right? Like, we made an agreement about that. Or when they are looking for ministerial services, that we send them back to their home group. Hey, Raymond. So that we went into covenant around that. But also for me, because we are smaller and we are less funded, right? We are less resourced. So when they've got stuff going on that I know my people would be into, I'm going to send them there.
Yes.
Right? I'm going to send them there. This is not a competition.
Right.
This is like, our family just got bigger.
Yes. That's exactly right.
That's that place where so often, right, we revert to or default to this idea of lack in competition. Like, oh, you may take my people. Wait a minute, what is that? Like, that language, that message is screwed up from the base, the foundation. And if we truly want to teach and to practice and to show new thought in all of its forms, then you have to be able to show that to people who don't label themselves as such. Right? So it really challenges us to live.
All right, I'm going to trust that Tracy just said, live our teaching.
Yes, live. I'm filling the blank. I'm going to go with live the teaching for 500.
But it's true. I don't know if you found that, David, but I, you know, you've been at this longer than I have. And, you know, after the crisis management of the last several years, being able to be in this interfaith community and doing this kind of work and this kind of relationship building, like very hands-on, on the ground, like, where are the paper towels kind of relationship building.
Yes.
I am finding like new soul food for me in my own ministry, in my role. It has been incredibly satisfying. I don't know
Yeah.
if you are finding that.
Yes, absolutely. And there's I've had a big campus, and I've had 13 water heaters and
Same.
units and a new roof to build this year and blah blah blah, and I don't have that now. And and this place is state of the art, and all of these different things, and we just get to make a contribution which helps them with their budget. And so I love that, because it frees me up to be more with my people, to be deeply engaged in those relationships, and to have that sense of security that we're both in Unitarian communities. Unitarians have been around a long time,
right?
And often they're communities like the ones you and I are in, have deep pockets, and found a endowment, and all those nice, wonderful things that we dream about. And so that's the spirit of cooperation and inclusion and support. It's like, we're in this together, and they have something we don't have, and that allows us to have a space, and then we can bring something to the table to them, and it's a beautiful thing. So
yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And I would just say, I'm looking at your questions, Tracy. The commitment to diversity inclusion, which has been strong in my community, all along. The thing that has changed that is really exciting to me is, I think the theories have become real to the larger community.
mm-hmm.
Right? They're having direct experiences and examples of like, oh my God, I had to try a new language today. Like, I actually had to do that, right? Like, I actually had to, check myself on a judgment I was having about this person or their policy. And so that has been amazing to actually get to now be like, okay, so remember that thing we read in that book 2 years ago? Here's how we get to now practice that. We're going to give each other so much grace, and we're going to practice curiosity right now in this moment, and learn about each other and stretch ourselves beyond what we thought we knew.
Yeah,
that has been like miraculous to see.
So have either of you had people leave the community because they didn't really want to do the work? They just liked the concept of being inclusive.
Yes.
Oh gosh, yes.
In great numbers. And here's a tip I will offer other leaders, because I know it's hard to watch people leave. Get used to praying blessings on your journey.
Yes. Absolutely.
Blessings on your journey.
Absolutely.
Wait, you mean I'm not supposed to chastise them and talk about them and how they're not loyal to us and they are not really, I'm not supposed to do that?
Not if you want to have, a life that works for you and a sustained career and maybe skip the ulcers. Yeah.
Some people bless you by coming, some people bless you by going.
Amen. Get your blessings. Get them.
They freed up a parking space that somebody else needs. Yeah.
Blessings on your journey. That has become a prayer that I hold close.
Absolutely. One of the other ways that it's the commitment to inclusion is, become real and visceral for people. And this goes back to, again, that exchange that occurs between the communities and the different things that we bring to the table. As I said, for us, the Unitarian Church, they're well established. They came into this space, they remodeled, et cetera. And so they bring all of that. They're embodying and building in their values of inclusion as well into the space, and then we're bringing who we are. So they are, it might surprise you. I know it won't surprise either of you, some listeners, right? Just because you're a church in Atlanta and just because you're a church committed to justice or inclusion in Atlanta doesn't mean you're a diverse congregation.
That's right.
So the UUCA is predominantly white. We are probably 50-50. Some Sundays we're 60-40, 70-30. Collectively, I'd probably say we're closer to 60-40 or 50-50, but a very diverse community on the whole. And so when we show up in their space, it's a whole lot more people of color than they've seen on a Sunday or any other time, even though they're a deeply rooted community here in Atlanta committed to this work. So some of that's culture, style of worship, and history, and some of those different things. So we bring that value into the space. They have embedded their values of inclusion into the space. So as I mentioned earlier, they have these beautiful, wonderful, state-of-the-art, gender-neutral bathrooms. So you walk in and it's all the sinks and the mirrors, and then the stalls, with doors. So when you come out of the stall, it's one big community area where we're all washing our hands together. And then there's an individual door restroom, family restroom that could be for any individual who doesn't want that space. But that was, we didn't have that in our old space. We use pronouns. We have trans folks in our community. We talk about that. But when we moved into this space and we had that, it was a really beautiful thing, especially for our trans folks and the majority of our community. But there were some people. There was one lady in particular. I would be in there washing my hands. She'd walk in and she'd go, "Nope," and she'd turn around and she'd go use the private restroom. Right? Like, it just doesn't work for her, which is fine. There's another facility right there for her. But the conversation the first several months we were there, as people are washing their hands, was fascinating, because they were like, "This is so interesting. This is so," all kinds of adjectives that they were using. And I'm like, yeah, this is commitment to inclusion. This is what it looks like.
Yeah.
And that was something that I was never going to really, at my budget and at my level, was going to be able to give my congregants as much as I wanted to. The other space we were in, we were leasing. I didn't have control over that. But even from a financial standpoint, but they did. So it's, again, just a beautiful way of having those exchanges.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the only other tip I would say, for leaders committed is we have to be willing to be wrong. We just have to be willing to be wrong. We have to be willing to have organized a thing and not included all the right people in our announcements, right? We have to, and then acknowledge, oh yeah, that I did that. That was me, right? I didn't reach out to the right committee over at the Unitarian, group. I didn't, let Manara's folks know that we were going to have this additional group come to food outreach. Like, we have to be willing to know we're going to make mistakes. We're going to do it wrong.
Yeah.
And continue to value the relationship.
Yeah. Tracy's in deep thought.
Tracy is in deep thought.
I'm curious if anybody in the chat has questions for us. Type them in the chat. I know Tracy will be asking that at some point. As we think of what else, I don't have her previous. Sounds like you have her questions in front of you.
Yeah, I'm glancing. Have we learned anything, and has our community learned anything since sharing space or programs?
Well, I think I've mentioned most of what we've learned about culture and style, and that we can be the same mind about things, but we still show up differently. Show up differently in how we pray and how we construct a worship service, how we even approach a worship service, are very different from each other. But we stand for the same things in the broader community. We, both our congregants and the ministry teams, we show up at legislative advocacy days on the same day. Sometimes we don't even know it. We haven't even planned it. And we're like, oh, we should have carpooled. But we're literally showing up for the same things, right? Showing up to advocate and support some of the same things in the communities. But again, we could still, even with all of those commonalities, still be very different from each other. And that's a beautiful thing. So
Agreed.
I think that's one of the big things that both I have personally learned deeper, and also our community is learning and experiencing.
Yeah, and I would just add, I've learned that what seem like really small details are important, like are actually really important. Like, we can't say these words in a song when we're in a Unitarian service, and that's important.
Yes. Oh yeah.
We need to honor that, right?
Yeah.
Manara worships in the social hall. That's where they do their Friday Juma services. It also happens to be the art gallery for the Unitarian community.
Yeah.
We've learned that maybe don't put naked pictures up in that space. Right? That's not going to work for a Muslim worship service.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? These seem like small details, but these are actually the things that matter a lot in the ways that we honor one another. So that's been a big piece that I've learned, is to actually honor and notice those small things.
You're on mute,
Tracy.
So one of the things you both have done an extraordinary job of is giving tips along the way and not waiting till the end. And we probably have only about 5 more minutes. So, so I'm not going to ask you to repeat the tips, but as you think about what is most important, what's most important for leaders to remember, or an example that you would like to share that you haven't already shared, if each of you could take 2 minutes or so, 2 to 3 minutes each, that would be great.
I'm thinking of something that I heard actually Bishop Yvette Flender say when we were doing relationship building between CSL and the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, her organization. And she was introducing me to her conference. This was years ago. I've been, 15 years now going to her conferences. And it was new for everybody. And it was, for some of their folks, perhaps awkward in ways. New thought, white guy. I was like, what is he doing here? And, this is our thing and all of that. And she was explaining her roots and she was building the bridge in her introduction, being very gracious in the way she was doing that, but then also teaching at the same time. And the way that she did her teaching was giving this tip. And she said, let's begin with the assumption that we are one, and then go from there.
Amen.
Right. And it like, you could feel the way it kind of rippled through the room. It was like, oh, everybody was thinking of the differences, he doesn't pray like we would do. And we do, and there's lots of ways that you could think, well, maybe New Thought and Pentecostal people don't belong in the same space or the same worship service together. Right. Here are all these really clear differences. And she was basically like, forget all that. Let's begin with the premise that essentially, how I would say it now, we belong to each other, right? And that we're one, and then go from there, which is a way of saying, put the relationship first. Mm-hmm. Do that, and then figure everything else out along the way. Because as the things that Amani was just speaking about, valuing, let's not put up naked pictures. Let's make sure this is in place, or we don't use these words. Those are the things you do when you have a relationship that you care about.
That's right.
You learn about your spouse and you go, oh, you don't like it when I put the dishes there, or when I do this or do that, or, and because I care about you, I'm now going to learn how to not do that or do it differently. So put the relationship first.
Amen.
Yeah.
I would add, I'm going to read you a line from our covenant that we wrote together. We value supportive relationship between our congregations as a mutual pleasure.
Mm.
And if there's anything I would offer, if you're going to go into space sharing or deeper relationship in an interfaith setting, or just any other community relationships, is go into it with the desire for a pleasurable connection.
Mm.
That we're there to uplift each other and learn about each other because it's a joy to be together. and keep your sense of humor. That would be my other keep your sense of humor. We are not surgeons, y'all. This is just church. It's just church.
That's good.
Well, I want to thank both of you because, yes, we've had some laughs. Yes, you've given some really practical tips and some food for thought for all of us because we're all on this journey together. I love that Raymond reminds us that diversity it exists. It's all the ways we're different from one another. But when we really are committed to be inclusive, it means we don't just parade or display the diversity, we honor the different ways that people express themselves and how we create something together.
Yeah.
From our differences to create something new. So thank you, Reverend Dr. David Alexander. Thank you, Reverend Amani, for being here, for keeping the conversation going when the internet in Dallas, Texas didn't want to cooperate. And thank you for all of the encouragement you're giving to not only your communities, but everyone who will see, hear, or watch this episode.
Thank you.
And everybody else, stay with us for 2 minutes. So I can thank you for being here today and remind you that we're here every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time talking about what it takes to become or to grow and sustain an inclusive church. And if you have specific questions or if you have specific suggestions, please put them in the chat and I'll see them and we'll use that in a future show. That is it for today's episode of Inclusive. My name is Tracy Brown. You can visit us at Stained Glass Spirit on Facebook or stainedglassspirit.net. Bye for now.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.